Samurai to the committee. She's given a valuable contribution, certainly since I've joined the IJB. I'm not sure how long she had been part of it, but I'd like that acknowledged in the minute if we can. And I think Councillor Dunbar is joining us to observe, although if you have any comments, you're very welcome to contribute, Councillor Dunbar. So can we go to any declarations today? Are there any?
Chair, can I perhaps do a roll call just before we get going?
Yes,
just,
certainly, Derek. Yes.
Confirm that we are, I know we are quite, I can see enough people present, but just for the record, you're here yourself, John, thank you. Councillor Cook?
Yep, I'm here.
Councillor Bell?
Present.
Luann Green?
Morning, Luann Grijon.
I'll get it right one day, Luann. Sandra McLeod?
Yeah, I'm here, thank you.
Alex Stephen?
Yep.
I'm here as Clark. Jess Anderson has tendered her apologies and is represented by Kundai Sinclair.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here, just trying to unmute.
Thanks. Colin Harvey, our internal auditor, is also present. Colin.
Good morning.
And as you said, we do have Councillor Dunbar joining us as an observer today, and Councillor Cooks are present. Other officers are present to assist throughout the meeting as well.
Okay, thank you, Derek. Okay, so let's go to the declarations and check if there are any today. Okay, I see nobody signalling, so we'll record that as none. And we don't have any exempt business today, and there's no reason for anything to be put to exempt, so there's none for that. So can we go to the minute from the 3rd of November, please? That's pages 5 to 8 of the pack. Just bringing mine up. Okay, so can we first of all just check for any points of accuracy on this? Does anybody have any? Okay, no. So can we go to any matters arising? If we go through page 5 of the pack, the first page of the minute, page 6.
John, could I just come in there in relation to the inspection of criminal justice? It's just about it's in the final stages of being complete, I understand. So we're going through that process as a set where we go back and forward in terms of checking and so on. So I'm reasonably confident there'll be some information, and I suspect for the next RAP committee that will be ready and probably should come to RAP as well, just to close that loop. It will need to go to clinical care governance and the IGB as well, but certainly in terms of this committee, it would go. I think it'll come to the next meeting.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Okay, does that take us through page 6? Page 7. And page 8. Okay, so that takes us on to the 4th item today, which is the business planner, pages 9 to 10. And at 35, this picks up the finance report, which we have following this item as the extra paper. And we had signalled in the minute from last time, or Alex had that it need to be a late paper, which we had accepted. So Alex, do you want to make any comment on the business plan?
Well, just to say, Chair, that as we move into that situation of the civil contingencies, and we've now moved into that gold, silver, bronze approach, and pressure continues to mount in terms of the hospital side of things and flow from the hospital, and obviously our teams have got a big part to play in terms of trying to keep that patient flow and get the folks settled in the community as quickly as they can. We've also got responsibilities around the vaccination programme, and then we've also got to continue to provide the critical services that we do and that we haven't been able to stop. So some of the items on here, will be delayed, and we've mentioned that within the notes to the meeting, and basically the reason for that is that the officers that have been aligned to do so have been moved into other roles to help support these three main themes within the partnership. So apologies for that, and we will continue to do as much as we can and get as much as we can going, but just mindful of the impact that this is having and how we best manage it as a team. As you said, finance is on, it's come late, which we expected, and will go to the IGB tomorrow. The review of the code of conduct is going on. The need to get a date for that one. I don't know if Kundai's got a date for that one just yet. Home First has got a presentation today and a report coming on in April, and the hosted services, I don't have a date yet when that's going to be completed, and I don't have a date yet for the social care and human rights impact monitoring, although I know there is some work being done on that as I've seen it this morning. So I'll pass over to Kundai to see if she's got a date for the code of conduct review.
Hi,
Kundai?
morning, Chair. Martin and I have been working on the code of conduct, and Martin and I's initial views are that initially we finish the consultation, which is currently ongoing with the Scottish Government on the model code of conduct for the IJB, and that's due to go to the Scottish Government on around the 3rd of February. So we're hoping that once the Scottish Government has had a look at all the IJB's responses across Scotland, they'll be able to provide a model code of conduct that they're happy with. And once that's been released, we'll then look into reviewing the model code of conduct. Martin, if there's anything else you want to add, please feel free to add something that I've missed.
Thanks, Kundai, through you, Chair. Yeah, we've sent in our submission to the Scottish Government by the deadline, so that's already been done. So as Kundai said, we'll wait to see what comes back from the Scottish Government, and then once we get that guidance, then we will be in a position to draft up a code of conduct for this committee to have a look at.
Okay, thank you, Kundai and Martin. So my understanding of that is that it will be the code of conduct, and it will be a question of how we implement it at that stage. Is that correct?
Yes, I think that's correct. I mean, it'll be the model code of conduct, and it'll be, it'll be how the IGB implements it at that point in time when it's updated.
Okay, and will that come back here, or is that going straight to the IJB?
I think it could probably go to both, to be honest. It might be a case of having a look at that and just seeing where it lands and what the changes are from the current code of conduct. But I think it would definitely need to go to the IJB. But in terms of just giving that other governance review, it wouldn't do any harm if it could be timetabled to come in here first.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so can I just open it up? Any questions? Comments around the business planner? Philip.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions really. So one is on line 38, which is the recovery operation Home First. So I see that the report has been delayed from the report on 27th of April. I'm just wondering what the reason for that is. Is it still necessary to gather more data, or?
We've got Callum Leask here, who is preparing that report, so I can pass over to him to give you a reason why it's delayed, but you will get, as I say, a presentation from Callum later in the agenda on this topic.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Philip, in brief, I said I will kind of go on to speak about it, but in brief, it relates to the point that Alex made earlier about moving into this new civil contingency status that the board will be aware of. Basically, what this means is it directly impacts on the priorities of Operation Home First and indeed the speed that they can move at. So in some instances, there are pieces of work which may be potentially slowed down. And of course, we need priorities to move at a particular pace and to be live for a particular period of time before we have enough information to make a strong decision as to whether they are having the desired impact and what impact that might be. So if we're looking at it from a portfolio perspective, we've got different priorities moving at different pace. And what we're keen to do is to give each of the priority areas enough time to try and deal with the current situation along with their situation, so we can present the fullest picture about what's going on.
Thank you. And one more question, if I may, Chair. On line 41, so this is talking about social care and human rights, and there was to be a report presented, but it says not yet actioned, carry forward to next cycle. So the next cycle will be 27th of April. I'm wondering why there's no date in there. It could just be kicked into the long grass almost, couldn't it?
It'll definitely not be kicked into the long grass, and that's certainly not the intention. It's just about making sure that, you know, the people who are around about that have the time to go and do it because of the other activities that they've been asked to do in relation to the response to the second wave. So I'm happy for that date to be added in there if that gives you more assurance that it won't be kicked into the long grass.
Super, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bell. Luann?
Thanks. Well, Philip asked my question about Home First, so that's good. My other thing was just to add to the conversation about the model code of conduct. And whilst I agree that, you know, we should be formally taking that to the IJB and through that, I think how we do that really well is through our culture and our relationships. So I think there's probably a place for it to be explored through our seminars and our sort of board development. So it's not just a formal thing that we agree that we're doing, but actually we take a little bit of a look at that in detail through our seminar plan for next year. So my suggestion would be we add it to that as well.
Okay, that sounds eminently sensible to me. And we can leave it to the officers and yourself and Sarah to timetable these things appropriately. Is that okay, Alex?
Yep, definitely.
Yeah.
I think if Martin, if you could, if Derek could take a note of that in the minute, then we can get that actioned and get that brought into the work plan in terms of the workshops.
Okay, I'm assuming that everybody will be content with that, but just as an opportunity in case there's any further comment on that. No, I don't see anybody signalling. So yes, if we can minute that, and that's helpful. Thank you. So anything else anybody wants to raise on the business planner? Okay, I think just Sandra had explained to us the civil contingencies and that the committees would need to respond to that. So I think, you know, that's understandable. One of the things as I was reflecting on, thinking ahead to the committee today, is that as we enter into year 2 of the different arrangements, the non-normal, we probably, hopefully in the summer or certainly early autumn, might be able to reflect as an IJB on what all this means for our risk and our performance, because a lot of things have had to be stood down, other things have accelerated fast, and we've got a strategy coming up. So whether this is a seminar issue or whether it's something else, I'm just conscious that as a risk audit and performance committee, we probably need to take stock of what it is that we're auditing against and viewing risk against. So we've got some of that today, but and I understand everybody's under a lot of pressure dealing with the emergency at the moment. But at some point it would be good if that can be factored into our thinking. Sandra, were you signalling? Would you like to respond?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to really say that I think from a perspective from the leadership team, just having had a discussion with the Chair and Vice Chair, I think, and also with the leadership team, we agreed that, for example, our objectives will again this year be linked into the medium-term financial plan, the leadership team objectives shared, and Chair's asked for them to come here. So again, that will be may well be something that you'd want added to that, because that'll show you exactly what the focus of the team will be on in regards to meeting the objectives which are coming from strategic plan, which will have that golden thread all the way through them as well. So not sure where that fits in.
Yes, I think if there's that sort of taking stock, that would be useful. It just feeling that, and this isn't a criticism, it's just the fact of where we are, that we're kind of trying to evaluate risk and performance, etc., on something which is shifting quite a lot, and so it feels a bit bitty, if you like, in terms of what we're doing there. And so I don't have any magic answers, so it's welcome if that comes back.
And I think some of that, sorry to come back on and see Alex has got his hand up, but maybe off on the wrong tangent, but I think there is, we have quite a level of detail that we're getting data back on a fairly daily basis, but it is operational detail, so as well as our action plans and things like that. So I'm not sure about, I'll hand over to Alex.
I mean, thanks. I certainly think that the bit about medium-term financial strategy and the objectives and so on coming out of that, and that was certainly the plan in terms of last financial year when we did the medium-term financial framework, and of course just after we'd agreed it, then we moved into the first lockdown. So that put, you know, a lot of stuff at that point in time on the back burner that we had originally planned. I think the other thing I would highlight is that we have been, you know, we have an action to try and pull together a lessons learned type of report at some point in time, and I think that should help in terms of the what you're talking about in terms of influencing the risk. But we also need to, I guess, what we need to think about in terms of the risk is what does this mean going forward? So if a whole lot of our resource, for instance, is going to be sucked into doing vaccinations every year, does that impact on the deliverability of the strategic plan? So there's stuff around, I guess, and starting to build that narrative up about what would the next strategic plan look like, and what's would potentially be the risk to deliver in this strategic plan and the next strategic plan, in the context of a situation where we've got, you know, recently had a pandemic. So more than happy to have a look at that. I know we were looking to try and bring that lessons learned report sooner, but I think it's been kind of stuck with some of the, again, we're moving into the second phase, but it's certainly something that's on in our sights and needs to be dealt with at some point soon.
Thank you very much, Sandra and Alex, on that. I think maybe, Derek, if we can just catch something in the minute about taking stock through medium-term financial plan and the lessons learned, but obviously the timing we need to leave to the officers to determine when that can be ready. Okay, anybody else, any other comments? Right, I'm seeing a hand. Is that Alison wants to comment?
It is, John, if that's okay to come in. Chair, thanks. It was just to reassure you that you know, we are currently working on developing the next iteration of our strategic plan with our legs, our public health coordinators and our engagement officer. That work is ongoing, and we're trying to protect that work from being diverted into the priority work that the rest of the team are working on. So it was just really to give you that assurance that is continuing, and absolutely we can look at building in maybe some check-in points with this committee in terms of how we're getting on with that work and where it's coming. Our ultimate aim is to get a revised strategic plan to the IJB's meeting in December. You know, so there will be opportunities in advance of that for us as to perhaps bring a kind of progress report, if you like, to this committee, if it would help.
Okay, yes, and I think, sorry, I'm hogging this a bit, but just on this item, I think I wouldn't want to create extra work by having to report here as well as elsewhere. So I think from the committee's point of view, we need to make sure that there is a process on these different things. And if they appear directly at the IJB or whatever, then quite happy that others, the chair, vice chair, and the officers determine a process and timeline that is efficient. I think our job is to make sure that those elements move forward. Alex?
Yeah, it was on something else, John, if that topic's finished.
Okay, I think so. I don't see anybody else. Yeah, okay, Alex?
Yeah, it was really just in relation to so the meeting on the 27th. I definitely have all those reports there. I guess it is quite tight in terms of finalising the final accounts. So I would expect that there could be, it might be a wee bit late in relation to that, because the figures won't be really kind of finalised until probably I'd say about the 20th. So trying to turn that around, but we do as much work as we can to allow us to move at pace at that point. But the other point I just wanted to make was, while we were on this, is that we might need to have a special meeting of the Risk Audit and Performance Committee early June to actually sign off on the audit and the final version of the accounts. So it hasn't been programmed in just now, but I think the date on the 22nd of June will be too late. Would be my feeling on it. Although I still need to discuss that with colleagues in Aberdeen City, and I've had an initial discussion with the external auditors earlier last week on that fact.
Okay, that's well, we'll hear in due course. We'll note that, I think. Okay, can we move on to item 4A? So this is the additional paper that we've received, and Alex, if you can introduce your paper for us and explain what we'll be doing today and then tomorrow at the IJB as well, just so we can transact this bit of the business efficiently.
So a paper came in to you yesterday. Apologies for that being late. I think we knew it was going to be difficult to get it at the sort of pace that we needed. But I think it was important that we did bring it. So if I just go through the report in a little bit of detail now to give you a bit of context and some of the information. The reason why it's here is because within the terms of reference for this committee, it has financial monitoring as one of its roles, and I was conscious that because the IJB was because we had gone into the emergency arrangements and the IJB was looking after the finances during that period when the risk audit and performance wasn't here, there hadn't been any financial information coming to the risk audit and performance committee. So I felt it was important that we tried to get this one here so that you could kind of show that you'd met that one in terms of your IJB of your terms of reference. So the position largely remains stable, is how I would describe it at the moment. The more funding has come in, which we were expecting within our mobilisation plan, and these are and the funding that's arrived has been shown in the table 3.2, so you can get an understanding of the money that's come in. Once we undertook the monitoring, there wasn't really that much of a movement in terms of the over or underspend on mainstream budgets. Most of the mainstream budgets had managed to, kind of stay within there. But we've got a little bit of an overspend on our prescribing line, which has been reduced by £388,000 of additional funding that's been received. So that's come down to 409,000, which is obviously a lot less than the 1.2 million that we were forecasting in Q2. And then we've still got some costs on our mobilisation plan that still require to be funded. and they're largely some of the costs that have moved either within the last quarter or the unmet savings that we haven't had an allocation for. My understanding is that we will be provided with funding for the amount that's on our mobilisation plan, and I'm expecting an announcement on that very shortly from the Scottish Government. In relation to the finance as it sits, so on the basis of what's here, we wouldn't need to go back to that's funded, then we wouldn't need to go back to either partner and seek additional funding, and we wouldn't need to use our reserves. We do have a small reserve of £1.3 million, and that can be used if need be to provide some coverage if required. I think what I would say in relation to the information is here is that I expect that this position might well move, and the reason for that will be I expect that there'll be some additional funding coming in from the Scottish Government above what's on the mobilisation plan over the next few weeks and months, or at least the next few weeks, and then that will help to move the position. So my feeling is that the position that you see just now, whilst based on the best forecast that we can provide on the information we have, may move in a positive direction over the next few weeks. And really the two risk factors we've got in relation to that are it could be a positive movement in terms of additional income coming in from the Scottish Government, but then we may see some late movements in social care, and that's something that we're keeping a close eye on. In relation to the report, you've got the appendices that we produce every week. I'd say that there has been, and this probably comes back to the point that John was making earlier on, there has been a movement in social care. You would expect that because you expect to see your residential going down in most settings. It's not shown as going down in some of our settings, but certainly going down in most in the older people and physical disability setting. But what we're seeing is more spend coming through on the care at home side as we keep people out of, try and keep as many people out of residential care as we possibly can. And I guess what we'll need to think about longer term is what does that social care budget look like going forward in terms of is that now the new pattern or the new trend that we need to kind of build into our financial position going forward. So there have been some movements between social care lines. We're looking at that in detail as it is at the moment to try and figure out whether this is a short-term thing or is it likely to be a longer trend that will need to be impacted on in the medium-term financial framework. The rest of the information is in the report. I would say that we've delivered more of the savings than we actually thought we were going to at the start of the year. So if we remember, start of the year we said we're going to deliver 5.7. I reduced that to that we wouldn't deliver 3.5 of that, and now that figure's improved because we've had a number of staffing vacancies on the health side that have helped to deal with some of the savings. Again, that's on a one-off basis, and it is something that myself and Sandra will need to look at in terms of the next medium-term financial framework. So, Chair, I'm happy to hand over for questions, but I feel the information that we've got at the moment has been largely consistent with what we've had throughout the financial year, and the certainty is increasing in terms of funding as we reach the end of the financial year. And that I think we need to bear in mind that this is a slightly unusual year in respect to the forecasting. There may be some late movements, but we'll certainly keep a close eye on that as a partnership.
Okay, thank you very much, Alex. Can I open it up for questions and comments, please? Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Chair. You do an amazing job, Alex, to manage our finances, and there's an awful lot of juggling that goes on. But these are unprecedented times, to use an awful word. We're in quite extraordinary times, and according to page 6, we've got an overspend of £3.5 million, I think. So that is that money that's been promised by Scottish Government? Can I ask?
Yes, I mean, the majority of that money will come in from the Scottish Government. The reason why I haven't reduced the forecast on that basis is that I've taken a prudent approach to not accounting for the income until it's actually received. But the indications are that that money will be coming in, and there could be more money on top of that. So that's where it lands as it sits at the moment.
But is it not the case though that I mean, last year you were saying, oh yes, it's been promised, but is there any date by which it needs to be paid by? Or, you know, we've got reserves, but reserves are not for, you know, not for just filling gaps where you've been promised money, are they?
No, and I think my understanding is there's going to be an announcement this week around about additional funding, and that should close that gap. But as I've said all the way along, if the announcement doesn't close that gap and it causes us a problem elsewhere, then we'll call a special meeting of the IJB to have a discussion around about that. But at the moment, and as you can see in terms of the table that's in the report, a significant level of income has come forward from the Scottish Government to deal with the COVID expenditure. And as I say, we're expecting more to come within the next few weeks.
Well, we're still £3.5 million down though. Okay,
thanks. As it sits at the moment, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Cook.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, similar kind of question or similar lines. Paragraph 3.2 in the report, Alex, says that the figures in the table are what's come in since the 28th of October, yeah? So is that on top of money that we got earlier in the year?
I've highlighted in grey are the new figures. So you can see there you've got money for prescribing primary care, the November top-ups and the December allocation for the winter plan and so on. That funding has come in since the 28th of October. You can see the ones that are in white. They've already been notified to the IJB in previous reports, so I've already told you about them. And that 5369 was subject to a fair bit of detail in the table within the last financial monitoring.
You're on mute, Councillor Cook.
Sorry. So the ones in white are the ones that we got prior to the 28th of October, and the ones in grey, the ones since. Right, that's fine.
Yep, that's spot on. It's maybe not very well worded within that, but that is exactly the point.
Grand, thanks.
Okay, Luann. You got a sticky button.
Luann, can you hear us? You're on mute.
No, still mute.
Do you want to put something in the chat?
That's it.
That's it now.
I think you're off mute now.
Yeah. Thank you. So I always listen to Alex with great carefulness when he's talking about the money, and I think what I'm hearing is this year we're probably going to be all right, you know, by all the signals that are coming through. What I'm interested in is what the impact of this year is going to be on future, and I suppose I'm just interested to get a sense of the savings we've made this year. How many of them are just due to us being in COVID, and how much of it are actually sustainable changes that we've made in the system? Because I think our challenges financially are going to be much more apparent in the years to come rather than the year we're in. So my question is, does that seem a fair assessment, Alex? And the second bit, you know, about the sustainability.
Yeah. So going forward, I mean, we had, as I say, at the start, we had £5.7 million of savings within our budget. At the moment, the figure that we're anticipating it will be generated is about 2.4. I think within that there could be probably about maybe another 1.5 that haven't short-term delivery. But I guess what we've got to look at is, can we make that short-term delivery or that, you know, permanent? Will be one of the questions Sandra and myself have to answer. And have things changed within the system? So for example, there's obviously you know, a number of vacancies within our services at the moment, and because of how COVID's come along, these vacancies haven't been able to be filled at the same rates that they normally would have been. And I guess what we need to do is to ask ourselves, is that a change that's likely to be sustained, or is that a short-term change, and then, you know, next year everything goes back to normal and we keep on recruiting at the same rate? I think that in terms of some of the services and how people kind of live, that people will be making decisions now in the context of a COVID environment. So maybe, for instance, if we had a number of people who were coming from elsewhere in the country, they may not be so keen to travel to Aberdeen and be away from their family and so on for prolonged periods if there's future lockdowns and periods like that. So that may impact on the decision making of people in terms of filling posts, and that's maybe something that we would need to consider going forward in terms of our financial strategy and how that impacts. I think there's certainly an undelivered part of that saving that we know straight off is recurring, and that will need to be built in our medium-term financial framework. The other area where we're experiencing a lot of change is social care, and what we need to do is to try and figure out how much of that social care again is a sustainable change, and how much of it and what we can do to influence it going forward. So that's certainly something that we'll be looking at closely over the next few weeks. And I guess they're probably the two main areas of risk as it sits in terms of the medium-term financial framework going forward. We will, touch wood, find out more about what's happening in relation to the level of funding within the health and local government settlements, and what the IGMBs may expect as a result of that on Thursday. So we will get more information at that point in time, and once we find out what the level of resource is, we're going to have to compare that against our budget pressures and some of the changes within our system to see what level of gap remains. I feel that though that there will be some additional costs. So the other big places where there'll be additional costs will be potentially PPE, potentially some of the sustainability stuff in relation to social care, and at the moment these are being funded by the Scottish Government, and that's something that we'll need to again see what's said about that on Thursday and how that may impact and going forward and so on. And then of course the vaccination programme is going forward, and if that's an annual vaccination programme, then I think that's what the current feeling is, and there'll be additional costs in terms of vaccinating the population going forward, and then there'll have to be additional funding for that to see where that lands. So we're having a good look through these things just to determine where we go, but there is certainly a fair bit of uncertainty next year, and we'll start to get the first bit of certainty around about that on Thursday.
Thanks, Alex. John, if I may, could I ask just another question specifically about out-of-area treatments? I saw somewhere, I'm not sure which part, but that they've gone up. Is that expected, or is that around COVID?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some changes within the whole monitoring that you could quite easily say are in relation to COVID, and there's some that, again, it's that indirect consequence. So, there has been an increase in clients that have gone out, and there's been an increase in the rates that we need to pay, but there's also been an increase in the staffing that's required to support some of the individuals out of area. So, and some of that is significant. Now, if COVID hadn't been in place, then we probably would have been looking at that and determining is there another way to kind of deliver some of that stuff. But at the moment, given everything that's going on, safest solution has been to maintain those arrangements. But yeah, that has gone up significantly. You're looking at between £200,000 and £250,000 per person who goes out of area, and also some of the size of the packages are greater than that, given the level of need of clinical need that some of these clients require. So I would say that, I guess, in response to your question, it's probably an indirect consequence of COVID, but it would be very difficult to say it was directly as a result of COVID. We may have been able to manage some of these costs down better if we hadn't been in the situation. And I guess one of the other bits that I could maybe just pick on is around about mental health, and that in a period of lockdown, people with mental health difficulties, it could have had a bigger impact on them, and therefore they're moving through the tiers potentially quicker than what they may have done if COVID hadn't been there and there hadn't been a lockdown in place.
Thanks, Alex. That makes sense. And just to check, is the same paper going to the IJB tomorrow?
Yeah, the same paper's going to the IJB tomorrow. Again, I just thought we could close it off there and just make sure that everybody's got the information that they need. The slight change is that you're being asked to note the environments and they're being asked to approve them. That's the only difference in terms of the report, apart from the headings.
Okay, thank you. I don't see anybody else signalling. I just had one quick question at 3.9 on page 6 of the report, Alex. It just mentions in the last sentence there, these costs being added to the mobilisation plan as a direct cost. What's the process for adding them to the mobilisation? Is this the extra money you expect from the Scottish Government, or what?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's because, I mean, when we started off on this journey, it was March 2020, and we were asked to put, basically just determine what the amount was likely to be, and it's very difficult to do that because we didn't know how much, what was going to happen in terms of the first lockdown, let alone the second lockdown, and how that would impact on the finances of the organisation. So there has been a process where we update these costs frequently and we pass them over to the Scottish Government. And certainly in the last, I passed the most recent cost across on Friday to the Scottish Government in relation to that, and they've now got that information. But as I say, the feeling that I'm getting is that the full cost of the mobilisation plan will be funded. If for some reason we don't spend all of that money, I suspect we'll be asked to carry that forward in terms of our earmarked reserves and earmark it for some of the spend in relation to COVID in future years. And I think if I'm hoping that, as I say, that we get confirmation on all that very soon. The other area, I mean, there's a couple of bits that have changed because we've opened up the COVID hub again, so that's being staffed now. That wasn't known until early January, so the COVID hub's operating at Cardiff Medical Practice. So I've added in provision for that, which I wouldn't have had in the previous one. And the social care costs keep on changing as sustainability costs keep on changing as the rules change and as the suppliers continue to put in their claims. So we've made an estimate, and that's on the sheet that on one of the other reports that's on today's agenda.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I'll move to the recommendations in a moment. I'm just anticipating that the chair, Sarah, tomorrow might just ask for some feedback from the committee consideration today. So I just wanted to check this off with the members of the committee. I'm assuming from what we've heard and the comments that have been raised that we are assured, having received this clarity through the report that's been presented to us, around the stability, as Alex has termed it, subject to receiving those funds, which we'll find out quickly, and that we're also assured, because of the movements in the budget being tracked and the implications, there's a process for that coming forward through the medium-term financial framework for future implications. So that's what I would intend to feed back, subject to any other comments committee members want to offer just now. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody else signal. So you're content that that's, if I'm asked, that's what I'll feed back from the committee. A big thank you, Alex, for all the work and you and your team are doing on this. It's, as I think other members of the committee have said, extremely assuring for us that you provided this detail and such clarity in such a difficult stage. Thank you. So if we can go to the recommendations, we're being asked to note the report, and we've provided comment on this, noting the risk and the management action, and noting the budget environments, which will then go for decision tomorrow to the IJB. Are we happy with these recommendations? Okay, yep. I take that as a yes. Yep. Yep. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Can we go on to item 5, which we don't have a paper for, but we're going to have a presentation from Callum. And if I move directly to Callum Leask, will you take us through this item, please? Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much. So I believe you all hopefully know me. If you don't, then my name's Callum Leask. I'm the lead for research and evaluation for Operation Home First. And what I'm going to do today is just kind of very quickly take you through some slides that I've produced, giving you a little bit of an update as to how we're evaluating Operation Home First, but also how we're developing our performance dashboard, which we can use to monitor the performance of Operation Home First as it evolves. So I will share my slides with you just now, and I'll speak through them, and then you can ask any questions at the end. I'm also being joined by my colleague Duncan Sage. Duncan is a principal analyst from Public Health Scotland, and he's been a fantastic source of support and advice throughout the development and implementation of this piece of work. So this first slide is a little bit of context as a reminder. The board will probably recall that I presented on this previously, but it's basically just to show where Home First sits within the broader strategic context. So you'll all be aware of the 3 main aims of Home First. It's about supporting early discharge back home, avoiding unnecessary hospital attendance or admission, and maintaining people safely at home. And I'm sure we can all see how that quite clearly aligns to the strategic plan within Aberdeen City. So there are a variety of priorities occurring both locally and regionally that sit underneath this portfolio. I've highlighted those which Aberdeen City take a lead role on in green. So we see our stepped care approach, the implementation of our new care at home contract, the scale up of Near Me, and of course, the redesign of our frailty pathway are all priorities within Aberdeen City. So from an evaluation perspective, we're really doing 2 different types of outputs. The first is a multi-layered evaluation, as we can see. So we have to evaluate each project individually. In some instances, we have to evaluate a program, which is a group of projects. And then, of course, we have an overall evaluation of the Home First portfolio. And the second thing we're currently developing is our performance dashboard, which, as I mentioned, is really the high-level metrics that we can monitor over time to basically give assurance on the impact of the Home First portfolio. And really what I want to do today is to give the board a little bit of a flavour about how do we get from a priority or a project to a performance dashboard. So I want to kind of explain that process and the development of that to date. So this slide shows the performance dashboard development flow is what we've called it. But like I said, this basically goes from how do we get from any one priority to developing a performance dashboard. So we kind of have a 5-stage process that I'll talk you through and give an example of. So the first thing we need to do is understand each individual priority and think about, is it a project or is it a program, i.e. a group of projects? And if it is a group of projects, we would apply this process to each of those projects. We then need to make a decision about which of the Home First aims does it align to, because given how some of these priorities have emerged, they don't all align strongly to everyone. They typically have a focus on maybe one area, and once we do that, we've got a better idea about what types of things do we need to be measuring and monitoring to give us confidence that this is working. So the first thing we need to do with any priority is ascertain feasibility, which basically means, is this practical to actually implement? So theoretically, we could have the best idea ever, but if our service users don't like it and our staff don't like it, then it will never achieve the aspired outcomes that we thought it would. So this is the first thing we always need to look at, and typically we assess this through acceptability, and that's to those receiving services and also to those delivering services. So once we're confident that any sort of initiative is feasible, at that stage we can then think about defining our outcomes, which is really what are the benefits of this priority. And again, we usually think about this in terms of 3 different tiers. So we think about service users, and that includes unpaid carers of service users. It also thinks about our staff, and then thinks about our resources and services overall. So once we've done that, then we need to understand the capability of each of these priorities, which really means how big a contribution will this priority have to the overall aims of Home First. Again, there's a lot of different ways that we can look at this, but we typically look at, for example, the number of patients who access a service. So this is really important because we could have a really, really good service that shows really, really good outcomes. But for example, if it only sees 5 people a month, then in terms of the contribution that that can have at a systems level, it's only ever going to be quite small. So once we've done this, then we can begin to select, well, what are the sort of the high level performance metrics that we want to look at over time. And that really is to help give us an indication that this priority remains established. And we also think about what assumptions do we use when selecting these metrics. So why are we choosing to monitor them? So I'm going to talk through a little bit of an example of this so you can see how this works in practice. So we apply this to each of the priorities within Home First, and I decided to talk about Near Me because I think the board has a good understanding about Near Me, the remote consultation, and just a general idea about what that involves. So if we talk through this, then Near Me is a project. It most closest aligns to aim 3 of Home First, which is about keeping people safe at home. Is it feasible to implement? The short answer is yes. We have good evidence from patients that they rate the Near Me experience as very good. And we have evidence from clinicians that also participate in the Near Me platform that consultations run without issues. So we can quite confidently say that this is something that is acceptable to implement to service users and to clinicians. In terms of outcomes, well, there are lots of positive outcomes that we've measured from Near Me. I've just decided to pick up 2 for the points of this presentation. So we can see that 62% of patients after their Near Me consultation were better able to understand their condition. So this is components of self-management, which is of course important for prevention and keeping people safe at home. And we see that 38% of clinicians reported saving travel time to patients. So again, we've got some efficiencies within service delivery there as well. In terms of the capability of the service, well, we actually monitor consultations of Near Me consultations weekly. So we can tell on any one week or any given month how many consultations there are being done in, for example, ARI or in Aberdeen City. So once we've done all of this, we can then also make a decision about what performance metrics do we want to monitor. And as an evaluation working group, we decided to look at Near Me consultations by week, by sector, plus a rolling average. And really what this assumes is that 1, digital is the preferable mode of delivery when it is safe and appropriate to do so. So there will be exceptions to that rule. But also number 2, it also assumes that this is a more efficient model of delivery for patients and in some instances staff. So this next slide is an illustrative example of our performance dashboard for Operation Home First and how this is beginning to develop. And this is beginning to develop with the particular Home First priorities that are at a more advanced stage. So we spoke earlier that different priorities are at different stages, and those that are at a more advanced stage, we're able to begin to integrate them into our performance dashboard. So I did want to show you this on Tableau and show all the cool functionality, but it's been really, really temperamental recently, and I didn't want it not to work when I was presenting to you, so I decided just to take a couple of screenshots for you. So basically, this is what our performance dashboard will begin to look like. So we will have on the left-hand side a variety of indicators or metrics that we want to monitor over time. We will then have to the right of that the priority, the Home First priority that they align to. And what you'll notice here is there might be some instances whereby more than one priority actually impacts on a particular measure. We then also have, if we move along further, the actual aim alignment. So which of the Home First aims does it align to? So if at any one time you wanted to see, oh, I want to see all of the priorities which impact on supporting out of discharge, then we can filter by that. We can also obviously filter by all of the priorities which are particular to Aberdeen City. And then there's a bunch of other stuff which I won't bother talking about just now. But we see over on the right hand side, we see the general high level trend of that indicator, so what it's doing over time. So say, for example, if we look at the number of near me consultations, and what we see is this, we see, oh, there's overall a big spike going up, and we want to know why. Then what we can actually do is we can click on that, and we can get an even more detailed example about what's going on. So we can track the performance over time. We can also do some other cool stuff in terms of benchmarking, and that might be to other areas in Grampian. It might be in some instances nationally. And what this does is it gives us a really good indication about what our performance has been like in the past. And then because of that, we can make some assumptions or basically targets about what we would want to achieve moving forward. So that's basically, that kind of shows you, I guess, what we would want this dashboard to look like, the process that we go through about developing it, and how that can hopefully emerge over time. So in terms of, I guess, our next steps as an evaluation working group, you know, Alex has spoken quite eloquently about the civil contingency status that we're in, and both Alex and the chair have recognised that what this means is that there are impacts on other parts of the system. And indeed, when it comes to the Home First context, there are some impacts of Operation Snowdrop on this. So in some instances, some of the priorities are potentially moving at a much slower pace than they were previously. In some instances, some of these priorities are still continuing on as normal. And in some instances, some of these priorities are actually being accelerated. So it's because of this, which is why we ideally want as much time as possible to try and get over these bumps in the road, so we can present a much more fuller picture about the impact of this. So in terms of our immediate priorities, this calendar year so far, what we've been doing is an individual review of each of these priorities with the leads, having an understanding about how this new context that we're working in impacts on them. And then what we're doing is amending and adapting our current approach to account for this new context. So I will leave it there. Hopefully that provides some assurances to the board about the process that we're going through and some of our early findings to date. And at this stage, I would be happy to open it up for any questions that anyone might have.
Okay, thank you very much, Callum. Can I ask you just to explain to us what we will be receiving in April, you know, if the report is ready to come back to the committee then, compared to what we've heard today?
So what I spoke through today was an example, basically, if we take Near Me, it speaks through an example of in terms of the actual evaluation of that one priority. And then it also links into the bigger picture in terms of the performance of the overall portfolio. So what we'll be presenting is essentially the impact to date of the whole Home First portfolio specific to Aberdeen, looking specifically at each one of the components of it and looking at what's worked particularly well, and then also the cumulative effect of all of those priorities against the Home First aims.
Okay, thank you, Callum. So can I, with that, open it up for questions and comments, please? Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation, Callum. That's quite interesting. I just wanted to drill down on the Near Me one a little bit. And you said there's a report coming in April, but I'm quite interested just to know a bit more now. So this is really, so my question really is related to the quality of the care. Now, as I understand it, there's a biannual, so a 2-yearly national survey that actually would measure look at all these various metrics. So, I mean, is that, in your opinion, is actually having a review of how good this newly introduced service is every 2 years a good measure? Or have I misunderstood that?
So there is.
Could I just come in on and answer that one? Sorry, Callum. It was just to say that the biannual survey it is a national survey, and we we do make use of that on a regular basis, but we also have our own local survey that we will use, and we have ongoing analysis of or evaluation of patient satisfaction. So we'll use a variety of methods to ensure that we keep on top of what we're assessing there. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear me or not, but I think I've probably got a bad connection there. But hopefully you managed to hear some of what I was saying at least. I've switched my video off so that possibly helps to connect. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. So I also understood from what you said that there are local measures made on a far more regular basis of how well the system is performing. So, and how regularly are those measures taken? How are they taken?
So if we take the Near Me example, then at the end of every consultation, there is basically a screen which patients can voluntarily submit a survey to give their feedback. So this is offered on well, I guess a daily basis, an hourly basis, upon every consultation, depending on the mode of delivery, particularly something like Near Me, because it's digital, it's much easier to have that frequency of data. And I guess what I showed in terms of the figures I showed, these are samples of hundreds and thousands of people. So it's really helpful in terms of giving us quite good confidence that this is something that we want to kind of continue to use when it's safe and appropriate to do so.
Thank you. So may I just ask one more question? I hate to labour this, but I think it is quite important. So as I understand it, if I was displaying symptoms of COVID-related symptoms, I'd actually say I was an older person, I'd slipped and I'd fallen, I'd hurt myself quite badly. What would happen in those circumstances? That wouldn't be the GP I would see. How would that work?
Sorry, can I? Will I come in? Yeah. Oh, on you go, Sandra.
I was just going to say, in what context, Councillor Bell?
Well,
I suppose if you've fallen and broken a leg or that, you would phone an ambulance. So
right. Okay. Well, that was an extreme example. But as I understand it, though, if you're displaying COVID symptoms, then your GP won't see you. So the broken leg was actually was an extreme example. But it could have been. It could be anything. So how? And I say I was an older person. Well, I'm an older person. But say I was I didn't have any IT. How would that work? I would just ring for an ambulance and they. Yeah.
No, it's a phone line, isn't it? It's I'll let the guys come in.
Sorry, I was just going to come in there that you would contact your GP as normal. You only the Near Me is only used as one mode of a type of appointment that you can have with your GP. But the first point of contact is usually just telephoning your GP surgery as you would normally, and with a brief discussion about what your symptoms are, what your issue is. They would then decide from there how they would deal with that. So it could be just a telephone call with the GP. It could be a near me appointment if that was considered appropriate. It could be a face-to-face, although you're right in the example that you used. If someone was displaying COVID symptoms, then face-to-face would not be the most appropriate way to go. Or they could absolutely suggest that perhaps calling an ambulance and heading into a hospital was the best thing for you. But it would be your appointment and your treatment would be on your personal needs basis. That, you know, the determination of how the consultation goes and what happens would absolutely be based on your particular needs at that time.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
Could I just come in there, John, if that's okay? It's just in relation to Councillor Bell's comments, some of which we're starting to move into a kind of clinical kind of aspect, and if it's helpful, and I know you've got an interest in terms of near me and so on, but if it's helpful, we could maybe arrange for you to get a conversation with some of the clinicians to actually talk through how and when it's used. If that helps to with some give you a little bit more assurance.
Yeah, that would actually be very useful, and also the some metrics that are used as well to determine how effective it is and so forth, and who are actually who are being used to actually give data to the metrics and so forth. That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah,
Councillor Bell, you may not have seen it this morning already, but I have responded to your email questions from the other week, and included in that response is a link to the assessment that was done on Near Me last year. So that contains a fair bit of metrics there. So perhaps if you want to take some time and have a look through that, and then come back to us and let us know if you need any more information.
Thank you. I was actually skimming it a wee while ago, but it's hard to skim that and listen to everyone chatting away as well. It's yeah. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks. That's very helpful in responding to Councillor Bell. So Councillor Cook.
Thanks, Chair. A couple of comments rather than questions. Having been in previous jobs, struggled with how to measure things that are sometimes difficult to measure. I'm very reassured by what I've heard. I thought it was a very good presentation, and I could feel myself sort of nodding as Callum was speaking there. And this is not statistically significant, but my wife had a telephone consultation with her GP yesterday, and is a satisfied service user because it was all fine. So that was it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Luann?
Thanks, and thanks, Callum. A couple of observations really from me for thinking ahead to the April report. So I really welcome some numbers to go, to get a sense of where the volume of activity is and how the activities impact on things like our delayed discharge numbers and numbers of hospital repeat admissions, the sort of the national indicators that we have. So it'd be helpful to, and I'm sure you're thinking about that, is tying it in with the national indicators we already report on. So that would be good to see. But in addition to that, what I'm really interested in is not seeing everybody as a number and actually making sure that we really focus on, it's kind of what's been touched on, that there's not a one-size-fits-all approach. So are you also gathering human patient experience so that maybe as part of the evaluation, it would be, here's the numbers and the flow and all that important stuff, but actually here's the human stories about why a certain route didn't work for that person, and to give that examples, because that would assure me as well as the data. Thanks.
Yeah, really, really good point, Luann. Basically, the short answer is yes, we're doing exactly that, and the reason for that is, well, because it gives meaning. It gives meaning to the numbers, and also in some instances, you're right, you can't. In some instances, because this is very, very complex, what we're doing, you can't boil everything down to just a number or a final figure. You need different pieces of data depending on what it is to really, really build that picture. So I guess what I presented today was probably an over simplified version of the tale, but what you will see in the evaluation is basically how, depending on the priority, depending on what stage it's at, etc., then we've been very, very careful to tailor, I suppose, our evaluation methods and how we collect data and how we present data to give the most accurate picture about what's going on. So yes, we will be doing that.
Thanks, Callum. That's good to hear. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, I don't see anybody else signalling. I've got just a comment and then a question here. It's similar to I think Luann's looking at this, because I like the method and the being clear, explicit assumptions. So really looking forward to getting the report. I think the choice of indicators is critical here. You get what you measure. In fact, you see what you measure, and that probably links into what are we not seeing. And particularly, you gave the example of near me. I think for us, we'll need to ask those questions. Who is this missing? And certainly with technology, sometimes people need help on that first step to get connected. And that might be quite difficult when GPs are and others are very, very busy. So I was able to have a look at some of Alison's response to Councillor Bell, which I appreciate others haven't seen, but there's aspects in there about the GP will determine whether the near me goes forward or whether it's a face-to-face, and that might be that will be based on their view of need. So we might need to think about a cohort of people who need helped to get connected. So I suppose we'll be looking at those aspects as well when it comes through. So that was just a comment. My question is, what we learn from this will. Oh, Alison's going to come in. Did you want to comment on that, Alison?
Yeah, sorry, John. Just perhaps I didn't make it clear in my response, but it is a conversation. It is a decision between the patient and the GP. It's not necessarily always down to the GP on their own. It's a conversation between the GP and the patient.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Although the power in that position is on one side rather than the other, but yeah, okay. Thank you, Alison. My question is that this is very welcome, the way this is going to come through, is will there be learning on this for our broader use of performance and reporting and monitoring? Is that the intention?
Yes, absolutely. Because I guess what's interesting about this is that it's a very, very specific approach to actually doing this, and what we're saying by using this approach is that we may not necessarily be monitoring all of the same performance indicators that we have done previously, but what we're doing is we're going through this process to understand, I suppose, each of the individual elements, and then what that provides us with is probably quite a meaningful, or hopefully quite a meaningful suite of indicators, which we're very confident that we can positively influence on. So there's that element of the development, but there's also the learning from the actual implementation of each of these priorities. So we're trying to implement a lot of change within a very, very complex environment. So one of the things that we're also learning, or we'll pick up through this, is the challenge of doing that. What's worked particularly well and what can we improve moving forward as well. But I see Sandra wants to come in, so I'll pass over to her.
Hi, yeah, I would just pick up saying, yeah, absolutely, the answer is yes to that. Just as Callum's explained, it is a very thorough, but one of the key things I think that Alison has taken a strong consideration is when we're building up our strategic plan for moving forward, and they evaluate this methodology of evaluation will be built into our strategic plan, so that as we move forward with our strategic plan, we're very clear about the performance measures that we're taking forward. And so what that should help is, of our current, how many, Alison, 150 or goodness knows how many performance measures we have at the moment, 120 performance measures. This should get us down to having a really consistent approach against our objectives of the strategic plan, and which can then give assurance to the committee and to the IJB that we are actually performing, how we're performing against the strategic aims. think that's, Alison, you've picked that up, haven't you? So it's just a really, we really see the benefit of this and want it embedded in our strategic plan going forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Okay, and Alison, will we continue to have the Tableau methodology or system in the background? Will this feed into that, or what?
Yes, we'll continue to use the Tableau dashboard as it stands for the existing performance measures for the existing strategic plan. And as we develop our new performance indicators going forward, it will be Tableau that we use to display them. So the Tableau reports that you're used to seeing will continue, and we'll develop on them and hopefully improve them.
Good. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody, and thank you for the presentation. I think it's been very helpful before we receive the report at the next committee to get to this stage, and then we can focus on what you're advising comes out of that. So many thanks for that, and everybody that's done work on it. And I wasn't aware that Duncan was joining us, so thank you, Duncan, for your work on this, and welcome to the committee today.
Thank you, John. It's been a pleasure. It's a great team up in Aberdeen and in Grampian in general to work with. I really enjoy working with all the guys up there. So
good, and it's very assuring for us that they're drawing on other perspectives and experience in this. So thank you.
Cheers.
Okay, if we can note the presentation and thank you for that. Can we move on to item 6, which is the strategic risk register? And Martin, can you introduce this for us?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So the committee have in front of them the latest version of the IJB's strategic risk register. The report outlines progress made since the register was last submitted to the committee. The recommendations outline that they're asking the committee to note the strategic risk register, specifically asking the committee to comment on risk 3, which is the hosted services risk, as detailed in the report, and finally recommending that the committee note that risk 10, which is EU exit, will remain on the strategic risk register until a decision is made by the IJB to remove it. Officers are here to answer any questions that the committee may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Can I open that up then for questions? And we're being asked specifically to look at the hosted services today, but it's open for questions on any aspect of this. Councillor Cook.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just a minor pedantic point on risk 1. It says that the provider of last resort is Bon Accord Care. I think legally, if Bon Accord Care didn't exist, Aberdeen City Council is the provider of last resort.
Does anybody want to just come back on that? I know we had a conversation about this about a year ago as well, for confirmation. So either Sandra, would you like to come in?
Yeah, it's Bon Accord Care are commissioned on behalf of, I think that's it, the statutory obligation does sit with Aberdeen City Council. So it's just a slight, I think we spoke before about it's just a word and it's a nuance in it. They are commissioned, but the statutory obligation does sit with Aberdeen City Council. But however, Bon Accord are commissioned to provide the provider of last resort. I'm going to ask Kundai to clarify in case I've got that mixed up, because I do remember a conversation as well about this before.
Kundai?
Yes, I would have to agree with Sandra that the statutory obligation lies with Aberdeen City Council, and Aberdeen City Council has entered into an agreement with Bon Accord Care. So Bon Accord Care delivers the services on behalf of Aberdeen City Council. However, if something was to happen to Bon Accord Care, yes, the responsibility and the duty lies on Aberdeen City Council to provide the service.
Okay, thank you for that. Did you have another question, Councillor Cook?
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, it's on, excuse me, on risk number 3. Excuse me. It's just to ask whether, or what's the timescale for the NHS Grampian audit of the governance arrangements?
Does anybody have an answer to that?
We do have information on that, but not to hand. So I think we could drop you a note out with the meeting, Councillor Cook, just to close that one off. I'm sure some of my colleagues are busy scanning their emails trying to find the report. This feels like a bit of a stall, like they do on the TV side of things. Well, they're waiting for that information to come forward. So we'll see if we can get to you before the end of the meeting. If not, we'll drop you a note and we'll copy the rest of the committee into that as well.
Yeah, it just strikes me that once they've done that audit, that then gives you the route map to get something in place to mitigate some of the risks. And if that audit is going on, doing anything else might be reinventing the wheel or duplicating the effort. So it doesn't have to be by the end of the meeting, but I just think it's an important one that we need to get the answer to.
Okay, thank you very much for that. That's helpful, and we'll get the advice on that. Any other questions or comments on the risk register? Luann?
Thanks, John. Just to clarify then, are we being asked today to consider increasing the risk against the hosted services progress? Is that, I don't think I was in it must have been a small group maybe that had a discussion about hosted, or are we, or what's the ask of us today really, I suppose? Martin, do you want to comment on that?
I think in the first instance, it would obviously be up to the committee if they were to have the discussion about the hosted services risk. But if they wanted to raise that risk, then that would be a recommendation to the IJB to do so. But yes, looking at the covering report, obviously this was coming out of the workshop in October, so it may well have been one of the groups in the workshop that had queried that. So as I say, I think it's up to the committee to consider the overall hosted services risk, and then if there's any need to increase the risk, then that'll be up to the committee to do so.
My sense would be it would be good to hear where NHS Grampian have got to on their review of that, and I know that there is some progress around that area. So I wonder if rather than change anything, we could make a note to come back to that particular risk when we're looking at the risk register again in RAP would be a suggestion. And my second bit is just to raise that John Tomlinson and myself were both at a PwC session on cyber security recently, and it really struck me that there's quite a significant increase in the risk of cyber attacks on health services, and it was just to put in the question whether we need to reflect that more in our risk register. Not for us to do that today, but I was really struck by I think it was something like 700% increase in cyber attacks on health services since COVID has started. So just wanted to have a think about whether we need to think about that more in our risk register too. Thanks.
Could I maybe come in there, Chuck? Yeah, so a couple of little bits. So in terms of cyber security, I mean, our strategic risk register is really about the delivery of our strategic plan. And so whilst cyber security is a very serious topic, we'd have to kind of consider whether that could impact on our delivery of our strategic plan. I suppose it could have potentially a reputational risk to the IJB if some of the services we were responsible to were attacked successfully. But it's probably something that sits within something else rather than a specific risk on its own, would be my feeling as it sits at the moment. The information about the hosted services, so yeah, we will get some update on that. I think 2 years ago now, it doesn't feel like that, but there was a lot of information that came out in regard to the hosted services, and I think it's important to kind of look at the context that there's 2 or 3 big services within that hosted services. One is the rehabilitation service at Woodend. and we're doing significant work on that, as not the rehab bit, but in terms of some of the services at Woodend, we're doing a lot of work on that in relation to the frailty pathway, and therefore that would then kind of, you know, there's a chance that some of those services will maybe come out of there and actually move into a kind of core or into community rather than within the Woodend side of things. So that's something that we need to be mindful of. Is there's a potential change around about that, and that would be probably the biggest service that's within that hosted. There's also the sexual health service and I think the prison service as well, which are big, but feed through you know, the roots of governance that we get through the IGB leadership structure. I guess what the thing is that, you know, there's a slightly different context to this in that you're seeking assurance from other IGBs around about some of that information, but I think there's a contextual thing that actually, in terms of the services we deliver, these aren't big services from what we would see it, and a number of these services have maybe under 5 FTE who are actually running them and feed into that sort of way. So there does need to be some work done on this. And I guess what happened the last time when we did it, it was a significant amount of work, and that's where, in the context of the civil contingency arrangements that we're in at the moment, I think diverting staff away from actually dealing with that would have an impact. But I think we just need to remember not to lose sight of that, but not to lose sight of this, that in terms of the whole IGB, there's two or three big services in here, and a number of the services are actually reasonably small.
Okay. I just want us to focus on the hosted services initially. As of Councillor Bell, is your question around hosted services or something else?
It was actually just a comment on what Luann has just said with regard to cybercrime. So yes, it was just really to build on the very valid point that Luann just makes. I read yesterday that this is an extraordinary sum of money. There's something like £195 billion attributable to cybercrime, and that was reported yesterday. That's nearly 10% of the entire UK's GDP on, you know, cybercrime-related fraud. Quite extraordinary. Thanks. That's all I wanted to say.
Yes, it's probably a subject for another day, but it is the seminar or workshop that I was at with Luann. Just the sheer volume of attacks is mind blowing. Okay. Just coming back to the hosted services aspect, my understanding is that when we had the workshop, there were a number who were looking at some of the detail in here, which talks about the scale of overspend and its impact on our budget. Although I think, and Alex, you may comment on this, the way that underspends and overspends have gone is that it and I think you've commented today, it's focused in one or two areas, and in fact other areas are underspent. So it's maybe not as severe overall as it was previously. Would that be correct?
Yeah, I mean there have been overspends on that budget in every year since the IGB's been brought together, but actually this year it's got a large underspend on that budget line as it sits at the moment, and that's after savings were taken out of it. So there's, I think some of that's in relation to when we went through. So as I say, the biggest budget is the Woodend budget, and when we went through the first wave, there was changes made to the service delivery of that, and then through the second wave, there's further changes that are being made, and actually, whilst not intended to save money, but to provide a kind of a better service over that period, that has had the effect of reducing spend, and now there's a major underspend on or underspends on those budget lines.
Okay, thank you. The other aspect in the narrative here is around the assurance side, and that's largely coming through the NHS side, and that there are still things being developed in terms of governance for chairs and vice chairs across the system. So I think those were aspects which we were asked to take a look at. I'm going to ask Colin to comment on this, and perhaps Alex as well. But if we get the audit from NHS Grampian, and we can look at that in due course, but there's also going to be a four-way meeting. Certainly, I've been invited to as chair of RAP, which will cover the 3 IJBs and NHS Grampian audit officers and committees. And perhaps what we can do for that meeting is indicate that we would particularly like hosted services discussed in the meeting, and how the 4 audits or audit arrangements can give mutual support in an assurance framework. Does that seem reasonable, Colin and Alex?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think you've indicated in your risk register that there's already an ongoing audit led by NHS Grampian's internal auditors in terms of the hosted services. I certainly think that I've seen some of the planning information from their auditors on that. And yes, that's the kind of thing that we want to discuss, how we're going to be aligning our different audit plans. So I've already been sharing those with my relevant counterparts in the various different partners, and I'm anticipating them doing so themselves as well, to show us where we are, and then we can have a look at together at that meeting you've just described, where we're going and how that all lines up, and whether we have that assurance over all the different areas we would like to have. Certainly hosted services is a priority for you. It will be for others as well, and that could form part of those discussions.
Okay, so Martin, we could come back to a specific look at hosted services once we've got that internal audit report from NHS Grampian, and have had that initial conversation with the other audit committees. Would that be a sensible way forward on this?
I'm happy with that, Chair. Obviously, the committee will be seeing the strategic risk register again later on in the year. Obviously, it'll be up to the committee if they want to bring that forward or take an earlier look at it. Okay, yeah, and as Alex reminding us, it's the strategic risk register for the strategic plan, and because that will be changing and is almost changing in front of us with Operation Home First, etc. So we can take stock of that later in the year as well. Okay, now, Councillor Cook.
Yeah, just in response to Martin's question about how soon we'd like to see this again or consider this again, it strikes me sooner rather than later, on the basis that the risk is major impact and likely. So if it's major impact and likely, I wouldn't want it to drift too much. So as I say, I prefer it sooner rather than later.
Okay, and I think Martin will give us the detail, but the strategic risk register comes alternately to us and to the full IJB, so we'll see it in one place or the other. But Martin?
Yeah, my understanding, I think in the business plan, it's due to come back in September to this committee. I can't remember the 2 times it's going to the IJB in 2021, but we can confirm that. But you're right, Chair, the IJB could consider the hosted services risk, or if you wanted the committee to do that, it's scheduled, I think, for September, but we can bring it forward if you wanted.
Okay, well, I think if we get the audit report from NHS Grampian, and once we have that, we should look at this again, even if we bring it back just for the one aspect, which is hosted services, if it's ready before September. Was that okay, Councillor Cook?
Yeah, that sounds fine to me.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments and questions on the strategic risk register? Okay, don't see any. So going back
Sorry,
to
John.
the. Sorry, Luann. Sorry.
My slow hand. It's just a reflection. I think it links very much to the last discussion we had about when we're looking ahead to 2021. We're going to be looking at lessons learned from COVID, bedding in the changes, and it will really change what's on our risk register potentially. So I think I'm just sort of saying I think it's all joined together, and the Home First outcomes and hosted. It's like a spider's web of everything, all the different things being interconnected. So I suppose our risk register this time next year might need to look very different to what it does just now. That's all.
Yeah, I guess we just need to wait and see what difference there is in the strategic plan. And yeah, did we just note that, or did any officers want to comment on that? Okay, so so can we go to page 11, and we've got the recommendations there. So we've noted the revised risk register, and we've commented on specifically on hosted services. So we've got minuted decisions on what we're wanting for that. There's the third recommendation here in terms of risk 10, remaining on the register until a decision is made by the IJB to remove it, given what's explained in the report about continuing, what would you describe it, the impact of Brexit still working its way through. Is the committee content with that recommendation? Okay, I think I'm. Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. So thank you for that. Oh, Derek.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's just further in recommendation 2.2. As you indicated, you have had that discussion and indicated that there would be the desire for the risk on hosted services be reported back to your own committee once the NHS report is made available to influence that report. I would intend to introduce that into the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you very much, Derek. That's extremely helpful. And yeah, that would be my ask, but just check with everybody in the committee that they're content with that. Yes, okay. Thank you, Derek, for clarifying that. It's very helpful. Okay, thank you, Martin, for your work on that. And can we move on to item 7, which is the internal audit plan for 21-22. And Colin, do you want to introduce this, please?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, this is our plan for 2021-22 and sets out our planned work in respect of the IJB, which is our audit of the transformation programme, which, as you'll have seen in the previous paper, is aligned with the IJB strategic risk register, which does highlight this as a high-risk area. We've also included a note of audits currently in the draft plan for Aberdeen City Council, the audit committee of which will be asked to approve this on the 24th of February. I think you'll probably agree that it is fairly light, which is reflecting capacity on both our part and on the Health and Social Care Partnerships side as well. But assurance is gained for the IJB through the Council and NHS Grampian's wider governance and internal control arrangements, systems and processes, which we and the NHS auditors regularly review. For example, today you've highlighted the risks of cybercrime, and we intend to set aside time in our plan to help review and develop the Council's approach to this. So that again gives us assurance on that side. So there are a number of other aspects of assurance which contribute to my annual opinion, which I'll be presenting to you later in the year, and which mean that we don't have to duplicate or replicate those within this part of the plan that I'm presenting to you today. I'd be happy to take any questions, comments, observations, and so on.
Thank you, Colin. Open that up for questions and comments. Just while I'm waiting for any indications there. Yes, understand in terms of it being a bit light on that basis, but I assume that we'll be getting the usual annual pulling together of the various assurances within the cycle on the reporting that's from yourself and from Alex.
Yes, that's the intention.
Yes. Okay. No, that's fine. My question on this is the timing of the transformation report. So Alison mentioned earlier that the IJB, I think in December, might be getting a first look at the proposed new strategy. But if your transformation is reporting, I think it's Q4, is it? Or is it? Yeah. Let me just check. Q4. It'll come after that. I'm just wondering, is the timing of this needing to be considered, or so that it can inform the strategy? I don't know, Alison, have you got any comment on that? Or Alex?
Yeah, I can maybe come in there. So I think what's happened there is that I think it's actually very helpful how Colin's programmed these in, because we're really mindful at the moment of moving staff off the front line to kind of do the internal audit reports. I think and Colin can easily come in here and contradict me, but Colin's reports tend to look back the way, and then using what's happened in the past to influence what's potentially going to happen in the future. So I'd be expecting that you would be seeking assurance on the transformation programme at that point in time, and what we've done over the last couple of years since the last time the transformation programme was looked at, and that would therefore give you assurance that what's happened over the last couple of years has been fine in that respect. Obviously, any learning that comes from that will be fed into our processes, and so going forward. I think it would be what the strategic direction that's decided comes from the IJB. So I wouldn't, that's what you want us to go and deliver for on your part, in terms of what you want us to go and deliver in the next years. And what Colin will come up with through this may be recommendations that would help give you the assurance that we actually are delivering on that, if you find some gaps in terms of what we've done in the past. So hopefully I haven't put words in Colin's mouth there, and he doesn't shoot me afterwards, but I think that's how it would kind of work its way through. So whilst the two are linked, they're not specifically or directly linked in terms of what we're trying to do here, because one's more strategic and one I think will probably be more operational.
Okay, Colin?
I would agree with Alex, certainly. Very well put. It's we're not really here to help drive strategy forward, but we're there to make sure that if it has been agreed, that it is being implemented as appropriate, and give you the assurance that you need over it, and the operation of the mechanisms that get you there. So there is that separation there. I've already had discussions with officers in terms of timing and so on. Obviously, there are a number of competing demands and pressures at the moment. So the later we can do a lot of work, the better for most people. But where it's essential to do it beforehand, then we're absolutely open to that, and we can have further discussions on it. But I think Alex is right here that it's better to give these things a chance to develop, bed in, and we will look back and see, have we got there? Are we going the right direction, and so on.
Okay, thank you for that. Still don't see anybody else signalling. So can I just comment that my assumption then is that it's been explained to us that the transformation, a lot of that's been picked up in Operation Home First. What was strictly the transformation programme has itself transformed, if you like. So I'm assuming that you will be looking back on the whole thing, including the way it has evolved in the course of the year. Is that correct?
Certainly, yes. Callum's very informative presentation today has helped me to understand how that's working and how that's going forward. So that will give us something to start with there, and we'll discuss that further with him and other officers to see how that has evolved and to make sure that the appropriate steps have been gone through in terms of the governance routes and the reporting route as has been described this morning as well.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
Could I just come in there, John? Sorry, yes, just to come in. I don't want to cut across you, but I just want to confirm that I think Operation Home First, or at least our aspect of Operation Home First, because obviously it's a regional kind of programme that Callum's working on, but because this has kind of taken the place of our transformation programme over the last year, then I think that it should be within the scope of what Colin looks at from our side of things, just to give you the assurance that you've got the right information and so on around about that. So just wanted to confirm that, so you're left in no doubt around about that, that this isn't looking back at stuff that, you know, that it's the more recent stuff that that we're interested in around about that sort of stuff.
Okay, that's helpful. That's what I was looking for. Okay, so don't see anybody else signalling. So are we happy to go to the recommendation, page 43, and approve this plan for the coming year? Okay, yeah. Thank you very much for that, and thank you, Colin. And it's for you on item 8, just to introduce the report on social care commissioning services contract monitoring.
Yes, thank you. This is a paper which has already been scrutinised by the Council Audit Committee, given it's responsible for the operational delivery of this side of the contract management for social care. We highlighted in this that monitoring procedures could be improved, particularly in respect of scheduling monitoring activity, which was at risk of not being completed promptly. Also ensuring signed contracts were in place, and a need for a consistent approach to recording monitoring activity. As you'll see from the next item on your agenda on service provider risk, the routine contract monitoring has been suspended due to the resource and other implications of the pandemic. But assurance is being provided by our procurement colleagues in respect of closer working with providers as a result, which I think is further discussed in the next paper as well. So we have alternate assurance on that, on those arrangements in terms of contract monitoring. And I know that Jean is continuing to develop the process to streamline it and improve it.
Okay, thank you, Colin. So any questions on this audit report? Okay, I don't see any there. We're being asked to review, discuss and comment on the issues that have been raised. Can I just ask, you will have produced an audit report and that would have gone to the council, but we're not seeing the audit report, we're seeing a kind of summary of that. Is that usual practice for us at the IJB side?
I think that's what you've been accustomed to receiving. This is how we've generally operated, the only exception being Aberdeen City Council's Audit Risk and Scrutiny Committee. What we do for Aberdeenshire and what we've done for the integration joint boards, both Aberdeen City and Shire, is to provide you with a high-level summary of the key issues that we identified. If you would like us to revisit that, I'm happy to give that some further consideration and discussion with you in due course. I am giving consideration to how we develop some of these summaries to more explicitly bring out some of the higher level detail. I think it's relatively clear as it stands, but I'm open to suggestions on that if you'd like to see more or less indeed.
Yes, I suppose my question is just prompted by, there's a couple of issues that you've specifically noted in the report, but then there may have been other issues, and I suppose we're taking assurance from other people on this and noting it that way, which, you know, I'm reasonably content with, but it's just a different level of assurance. I don't know, do the officers have any view? I don't want to change things, certainly not at this time anyway.
Okay. Yeah, so this has been something that we've kicked about a few times in terms of the IJB, and it was agreed that we would provide a summary. So I think the assurance that you're receiving is that, in terms of that executive summary, that Colin's picked out the salient points to make you aware of exactly what's happening within there. The issue is that, obviously the more detailed reports go on for a fair bit, and the recommendations within the reports are graded according to a scheme that Colin's got in place. So, as I say, initially, or at the start, IGB got the full report, and then it moved into actually becoming a summary of it. In Aberdeen City Council, they still see the full report as it sits at the moment. The process is that if it's a service that's run by Aberdeen City Council, then they receive the audit report first, and then it comes to here as a summary. For instance, if it's something that's an IJB report, such as the transformation one, which we discussed in the last paper, it comes to here first, and then goes to Aberdeen City Council for assurance there, just to kind of close off that route and how that all sits together. So I think the assurance that you're taking here is that, and having worked with Colin for many years, I know that if he feels that there's an issue that requires to be raised to the IJB, he will raise it, and it will be raised within the summary of that report.
Okay, I mean, and I suppose my only comment would be, Colin, if you're reviewing how you're reporting on that, you may want to just think, if you've got a grading system, and I'm used to that in other audit committees, of kind of high, medium, low, or whatever you're basing that on, it might be helpful for us to know that these two that you reported are the high ones or whatever. So it might be useful just for that methodology for us to become familiar with it. But okay, that's fine. Luann, I'm not sure the order of the hands here, but so Luann, can you go first?
Thanks, and that was helpful for me to just get that better understanding of where this has already been. My question was just on the bit that's been chosen to be included, which was a contract was found that wasn't signed. And I'm wondering, is that just given here as an example, and that's been covered by the recommendations that have already gone forward following this audit? Or is there a particular reason why that was highlighted for our eyes today?
Thanks. Yes, it has been highlighted as a recommendation within the audit, and Jean and her team have addressed that with the relevant contracting parties within the partnership. So it's the responsibility of those requiring to deliver the social care to go and get the contracts in place, get them signed. They're then bearing the risk if there are any issues, or if the contract is not signed, if there's an impact on service delivery as a result. So we have reminded the appropriate people as a result, which was the recommendation that we made to get these contracts updated in place, and to ensure they have the appropriate assurance before they go ahead and place further orders with those services.
Okay, thanks, Colin. Thank you.
Jean, did you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to offer a bit more information, reassurance about the work that we're doing on reviewing our contract monitoring procedures. So we have actually designed, if you like, a new process, and we're carrying out a trial of that at the moment. So we're right in the middle of that, and we hope to have that concluded, and a report back to Colin to ensure that it satisfies all the recommendations that were made before the end of the financial year.
Okay, thank you, Jean. Anything else on this item? Okay, if we can go to the recommendation, page 49. Let me just get to that. So we've been asked to review, discuss and comment on the issues. We've done that. How will that be minuted, Derek?
Thank you, Chair. I was going to suggest that it perhaps is more appropriate for the committee to note the issues raised within the report and the actions taken to resolve those issues.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate. Colin, are you content with that?
Absolutely. Yes, thank you.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Derek. And as a committee, you all content? That's how we go forward. Okay. Thank you. Jean, you've got your hand up still. Is that? No. Okay.
Sorry, that was a stale hand.
Okay, stale. I've not heard it said that way before, but Derek, have you got a stale hand or a real fresh hand?
I was still writing.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so thank you very much for your work on that, Colin, and we look forward to receiving your reports in the coming year as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
So if we go on to item 9, which, as people have said, is linked to the same topic. Jean, do you want to introduce this for us?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this report is really an update on the risks relating to sustainability of social care service providers throughout the pandemic, and also about what we're doing to mitigate those risks. So at 3.1, the report sets out really what the risks are that we have recognised, and it's really 2 aspects. So it's increased costs and reduced income. So just to give some examples of increased costs, that's about quite a lot about the price and availability of PPE, and also about increased staffing costs linked to staff having to perhaps be off sick or self-isolate, and providers having to arrange cover for those services. Examples of where income is sometimes reduced for providers includes voids in care homes, where the care home has been unable to admit new residents on public health advice. And perhaps for the non-residential care services, sometimes there has been the reluctance of families to allow carers to access the family home and have taken on care themselves. So those are a couple of examples. At 3.2, it sets out how the Scottish Government is supporting the sector with additional funding, and Alex has made reference to that. Scottish Government also set out national principles for sustainability and remobilisation payments. This kind of national guidance is issued jointly by Health and Social Care Scotland and COSLA, includes what's being referred to as a social care support fund, which is really linked to being able to ensure that social care staff are paid their full wage, even if they're off sick, rather than just receiving statutory sick pay. So my team, the social care team, which is part of Commercial and Procurement Shared Service, are managing this process. We've established this process, working collaboratively with both Aberdeen City and Aberdeen Shire partnerships. We've designed and implemented this process for 2 different processes, really. So looking at critical care, care homes, care at home supported living services, for them to submit costs, claims for additional costs and reduced income. So those claims have to be supported by evidence. Once they are received by us, the contract managers in my team have an initial look at them, make sure they're fit for purpose and add them to a tracker, and then the information is shared with finance colleagues who give approval or wish to have further conversations with providers. There's also slightly different arrangements in place to support providers of what we term non-critical services, so a range of support services and some training and skills development services, mostly for people with learning disability. And this is mostly by being flexible in the expectation of how strictly they are able to comply with their contractual requirements and service specifications. For example, a common example is services that used to deliver physical group meetings. They used to facilitate those group meetings and people getting together, might now be doing so through some kind of social media online meetings. So at 3.5, does kind of make reference to the fact that the work, all of this work is complex and it is resource intensive. So we're following the national guidance as closely as we can, but that guidance is open to interpretation and is being updated frequently. So we're having to keep revising our own local guidance and our own local process to keep aligning with the national guidance. I think at the moment we're on version 5. We've just introduced version 5 of our guidance and our kind of application form. 3.6 sets out there are 2 significant challenges in relation to the work. One is about complying consistency in this kind of changing landscape. So consistency about decision making, I think, is very important. We've asked providers now to submit monthly claims so we can ensure that those claims align with the guidance that was in place at the time. We have regular 2 weekly catch-up meetings, and those are held collaboratively across Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire. And I think that's very helpful to ensure that we're all still following the same kind of guidance with the same interpretations, and just have a consistent approach across the 2 partnerships, which is helpful for ourselves and for providers as well. The other significant challenge, I think, is ensuring that we receive suitable evidence to support the claims. This has been quite contentious across Scotland, I think, with lots of different partnerships having different levels of expectation about what is suitable evidence. I'm kind of putting air quotes around that. But I think we've got that. We've got a fairly good process in place, tried and tested, and we have that kind of double look at it. So the contract managers have a look at it first, and then it goes across to finance colleagues for them to ensure that they're satisfied with the evidence that's being provided. So once everything's agreed, then we pass that the payment tracker onto finance colleagues who actually make the payments as soon as they can. I think one of the other things that we don't know is, one of the things we can't control really is how promptly providers actually submit their claims. And I think that's an issue for trying to, for Alex and other finance colleagues to try and forecast what these amounts might actually add up to. We have kind of thought about how we can maybe issue deadlines and hold firmly to them, but I think that it's very difficult to do that, given that there is the Scottish Government commitment that providers will be supported for these kind of costs. So we do what we can to try and encourage them to submit their claims as promptly as they can, and then we deal with them as promptly as we can. So I think it's fair to say at the beginning of this, we thought this supplier sustainability process might be in place for maybe 3 or 4 months, but here we are nearly a year later, and there's no end in sight to that. So we'll continue to manage the process and deal with these claims for as long as it's required. I think the evidence of this having mitigated the risk is that to date no services have failed because of these kind of financial issues. 3.10 was a paragraph that just made reference to the suspension of routine contract monitoring, but I think we've kind of covered that in discussion about the previous report. So, and the only other thing to add is that there was an appendix to this report which summarises I guess the work to date. So the number of claims that have been received, the number of providers that have been supported, and some values linked to that. So you can see from that that to date, the payments have amounted to £2.8 million, and the forecast to the year end is about £5.5 million. So I'm happy to answer any questions on that.
Okay, thank you very much, Jean. That was very thorough, and in terms of what you're doing and how you've explained that to us. And obviously, this is a key thing for us to be assured on, because it's a large slice of the overall budget, and to know that all the providers or no providers have had to give up, if you like, through a very difficult period is extremely assuring for us. Okay, I'll open it up for questions. Luann first.
Thanks, and thanks, Jean, for that. I think that the fact that there hasn't been any providers having to close really shows that the value of this programme and how important it's been. So just to say thank you to you and the team for administering it, and I totally get the complexity around that, but it sounds like it's been a lifeline for some providers. So I have two questions. One is, we're on version 5 of the guidance. Is that because providers maybe who didn't meet the criteria in the first version have been able to feed in, highlight gaps? Has it evolved with feedback from service providers who are maybe struggling? That's my first question. And secondly, I'll just do them both, is have you got a sense of what's going to be available beyond March this year? Because I think we quite often think in terms of getting to March, but it's very clear that we're not going to be through COVID by end of March. So they're my two questions. Thank you.
So to answer your first one, COSLA and the other body that kind of designs this guidance, yes, has taken feedback from service providers. There's a national group that looks at this, and I think Annie Gunnar-Logan from CCPS is represented on that group, and Scottish Care are also represented on that group from the private providers. So yes, feedback is taken that kind of feeds into the development of the guidance. There's also chief finance officers have a discussion at their groups, which I know Alex attends, and feedback, their thoughts on the process through into the national guidance. I think the other thing that has influenced the national guidance, so basically people are learning as we go, and it's developing in accordance with that. And also as I said, we expected this to last for 3 or 4 months, but it's still going on. So for a period last year, the support was being tapered down the way. So they wanted to avoid a cliff edge of just saying, right, that's it, all the support's finished. So it was tapering down, for example, by reducing the percentage of voids in care homes that would be funded. But then there was the realization that actually the numbers are increasing, and the support went back to 100% of that, although at a kind of reduced value. So sorry, that sounds a bit a bit confusing. What they pay in terms of care home fees, what is supported is 80% of the price, but 100% of the vacancies, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So that was the first question. Yes, there is kind of input from providers into the national guidance, and you'll have to forgive me, but I've forgotten what your second question was, Luann.
Just the signalling about what funding will be available beyond March.
Yeah, well, I think we don't know. The latest lot of guidance covers the period December to March, but I am aware that there's already, I had sight of a COSLA paper yesterday that indicates that, people are starting to think about April onwards, because there's a realization this isn't going to end by the end of March. So, Alex, do you want to come in there? You might have some more information about that than me.
Yeah, just to kind of say, I think there is a recognition at national level that these costs are going to continue to come in, and they will straddle the financial years. And I guess that what we're it's kind of what I spoke about in terms of the financial update, that there will be additional PPE costs, and there'll be additional and there could still be there could still be periods of isolation that care home workers need to undertake, and that's got an impact on the staffing, and there could still be vacancies as a result of decisions because there's been a positive case within a care home, and therefore the care home can't be filled, and the care home place can't be filled, and that's also got financial impact on the providers. So I think we are very aware of what that looks like, that there will be implications on that, and certainly that's the representations that are being made to the Scottish Government in regard to some of that stuff.
Good, thank you. Thanks.
I think you're on mute, John.
So I am. Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions on this report? Alex?
I was just going to say, if there's no questions, I think I just kind of like to thank Jean and her team for all the work they've done around about this. It's a full-time job in itself, dealing with this, never mind doing the day job as well. So I know that there's been a lot of work undertaken by them on this. I think our processes and so on have improved as we've gone through this, because it was a learning process for us all at the beginning, and we're now in a better place. And I think that the information that's being provided by the providers is better than it has been previously as well. So we continue to look at ways to kind of speed up the process and to evidence the claims, and that's certainly something that we're working on. You know, we need to try and get as much of that money out the door as we can by the end of the financial year, and that's certainly something that I've been speaking to colleagues about in terms of how to move that forward. So just to really, I think it would be great if Derek could note the thanks on the note, because as I say, they have done a fabulous job in terms of trying to manage this under some pretty difficult circumstances.
Thank you, Alex.
Yes, very much happy for that. And you beat me to it in the sense there's going to be a generic one of those at the end when we do our assurance, but happy for an extra acknowledgement to go in the minute at this point. It does give us a lot of assurance that this work's going on, and the result of it in terms of sustaining the providers. So thank you very much for that, Jean. Okay, so that takes us to our last item, which is in fact asking the committee if they've received assurance from the reports that have been provided today. Derek?
Just before you go to your confirmation of assurance, can we just get confirmation of the recommendations for that last report,
Okay.
please, Chair?
Yes, okay. At page 53, noting the content of the report and the work that's being done to support service provider sustainability in the social care sector, plus
Alex comments.
Plus Alex's comment as well on behalf of the committee.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Derek. So going on to item 10, which is asking the committee if you've received assurance from the reports considered today. Okay, I'm assuming that that is the case, so we can minute that. But I would also like to have a note in the minute, Derek, here where we are acknowledging the period, the pressures that all staff are under at this time, but also seeking to give us assurance. And I think we're trying to get a balance on that, I think, but we have got that through the individual reports, but also what's come through the discussion at the committee in terms of the process for continuing assurance appropriate to the current time. So if you can add that into the minute, Derek, acknowledging the pressures and the work, the impressive work of our team, and the assurance that gives us in the process going forward. Is that okay? The committee happy to have that in the minute?
Yes, agreed, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And Derek, you better pick that up into wordsmith that into something sensible.
Yes, got it.
Good. Okay. Well, that's taken a bit longer than I thought when I saw the agenda today, but I think we've thoroughly looked at it and received the appropriate assurance. So can I thank everybody for your attendance today? Okay, thank you very much, and that concludes the meeting.
Cheerio.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.